I'm not sure what kind of person this makes me, but on the weekend, my husband started a new job and he has to do a whole bunch of work. And so of course I'm like, I'll sit next to you and also do work because I don't have anything else to do apparently. But in my spare time, I created a Google Excel spreadsheet that I started putting in all of the past Zoom meetings for these meetings. So if you want to go back and be like, oh, I'm searching for this because I used your description, Susan. So like you could search. Anyways, like I said, I'm not sure what kind of person this makes me that I spent my time doing this. But I've been talking with students. They're like, I was like, oh, we've talked about that in the Peerfit Connections. And they're like, when was that? I'm like, I have no idea. So I started that all the way from I think 2020. So
Wow.
I don't know why, but yes, it's a thing. But so feel free to go. It's in the oh my gosh, Peers. That's what it's called. So it's just listed in there. And I'm gonna try and like organize it a little bit more so that you can quickly find a topic that you're interested in. But yeah, that's my update. And I'm super nerdy and I had to share it. That is all.
So, well, first of all, Maggie, you rock. Like that's just amazing. And should you, because I think I started those descriptions like not from the beginning, like May 6th, May 8th of 2020 was our first meeting. And so should you ever have like a master's student that wants to do an independent study or a directed study, I mean, those are hours and then, per credit and that kind of thing, is that they could also fill in some of the blanks by listening to the tapes from maybe 2020 and just jotting down some keywords or something, and then, because I think that would be a really good use of their learning, right? Because then they would have exposure to the experiential stuff, but it could also, benefit that just as a, as a thing. I know sometimes students are looking for projects, but thank you. Oh my gosh.
I put
That's
the
great.
link in the chat.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you have suggestions, I just like nerd out about this stuff. So yeah.
Oh, thank you. That's fabulous. Somebody had asked last week, wasn't it? In our discussion about whether they were, oh yeah, I think maybe, was it one of the students? If it was searchable or whatever.
I think
So,
someone did ask about, like, we were bringing up a topic and then we're like, I think we've talked about that before, which was why I was like, we should just do this. So,
yeah. Oh, I know. They were asking about home visiting, and we were saying, yeah, but like you can't not talk about a topic enough, right? I mean, because there are other people that are with us or different experience or whatever. So, and let me all just thank you too last week for all of your support to Megan for her experience, which was, I still, like I am still in sort of echoed shock waves over the verbal assault that she experienced and hope that she's gotten support. So, well, obviously, Ellen, then you haven't watched the recording from last week.
I haven't either.
I've been swamped this week.
Oh,
I
yeah.
will, just haven't done it yet. It's okay. You can just type into me. We don't have to take up time.
Yeah, no, it was, I would invite any of you, if you weren't there. It was an experience none of us would want, but I think Ellen, you would appreciate it. I mean, just in a nutshell, there was a parent that clearly was very, very stressed and took their stress out on Megan as the parenting educator. Not for being a parenting educator, but around rules and policy and that sort of thing, and being the person who is not charged with maintaining the policy, right, but was right there in front to receive the person's stress. And yeah, so, but it was a pretty awful experience none of us would want to have, and I appreciated Megan sharing it with the group. And yeah, so Yeah. So, so what do we have for today?
Can
What
I
would you
just
guys,
ask a question?
Lori, go. I'm gonna
Um,
mute my dog.
This came, I mean, way back, this was brought up and I can't find my notes on it, but I think I've completed now my 2-year project of downloading all my files on Google Docs for whoever comes into my position. But someone had mentioned a site for icebreakers for parenting groups. And I thought, I mean, was it positive was in the title, but do any of you remember that site
For icebreakers?
for icebreakers? No one here? Okay. I was just gonna leave that in the file and I couldn't remember.
So you're saying it's a web, it's not part of Peers, right? The icebreakers added to Peers. It's another website that you said has
was
positive in it.
It was discussed during one of these sessions. Somebody brought it up that a really good place to go to for icebreakers for parenting groups.
Oh, well, shoot.
And I thought they said like positive curriculum or positive parenting curriculum. I don't know. I couldn't remember and I can't find my notes on it, but
UG, would that be in the resources? Would it have come up in the chat and then in one of a chat? And does that ring a bell to you at all?
Yeah, if that came up as a resource, it should be in one of the chat, the resource. But I don't recall this term yet. For now, I don't recall this iceberger. I use iceberger for this parent self-care part, but I think that because I'm conscious and unconscious, right? So that is the iceberg I'm using, but I have no idea what is this iceberger about.
okay. Well,
Laura,
thank you.
you're not thinking about the guidelines on a stick, are you, that came out of the positive parenting experiential learning thing, are you? Is that what you're thinking of? No.
I don't know.
Okay. I think I would have written down an icebreaker thing. I was just looking for one this week. I'm like, God, I hate icebreakers. Like if I had a website that had icebreakers, that would be like front and center on my website, on my, Becca too. It has not ringing a bell for me. I'll keep looking though. Maybe I'll find it.
Okay.
Share with us, Ellen, if you found it.
Oh, I
I
will.
can put into the list.
Mm.
Ellen, you
What?
have a folder called icebreakers. I just did a search in Google Drive.
Well, that's the one that Maggie was asking about. So in Peers, people have been adding icebreakers. So it's not that. I mean, there is that, yes. But I think Lori's asking, like, someone found a website that has
Oh,
icebreakers.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there is a Peers folder that's icebreakers, and people have been adding that.
Where? Under parent ed?
I'll get the,
Yeah, it'll be under parent ed.
yeah, I have,
Um,
here's the,
Lesson plans and resources?
Yeah, it's got to be in there.
yep. And here, I'll put it in the
Ooh.
thing
Hmm.
over here, everyone, here we go.
Oh, they're all things that I think I've added. They're not. I thought there were more than this, but I guess not. No, we had more.
What's that one? Yeah. Journal questions.
So one
Yeah.
thing that has been coming up in my position and being new at the U, like, is students asking for like lesson plans or scope and sequence documents. And we always refer them here, but there aren't a lot of lesson plans. And in like conversations with the state too, with Mike, like, he's like, yeah, people always ask about it. And like, they're out there somewhere. And it, anyways, it's another thing that we have talked about having a student take on, but there's so many pros and cons of that too, right? Like someone has to keep updating it I don't know. There's just like, there's always pros and cons. But one thing that Mike brought up, which was interesting, was what if there was more in the, what is it called? Teachers pay teachers or something like that.
Okay.
What if we like had more of that out of parent ed? Because I think the deal is like we spend so much time on our lesson plans. They're like our babies. So people don't want to give them up, you know, which is super fair and legit. But I thought that was a really interesting idea of like having a system where you could pay some money and receive
Well,
some
that's-
money for a really great lesson plan that you made.
Well, and that's why I started the Google Drive. It was exactly because of teachers pay teachers. And I was like, this is stupid. There's a thousand lessons plans for kindergarten teachers in the lesson A. And I can't find a lesson plan, a new fresh lesson plan on temperament. So that's why I started it. The only problem is I think everybody has awesome lesson plans. They just forget to like, oh yeah, I should share this. Do you know what I mean? Which is why I opened it and started it. But the problem is when I had it open to the world, people were uploading just random photos with no lesson attached.
Yeah.
People were uploading Facebook links that didn't even work.
Yeah.
So I had to go through and dump a ton of stuff that was not even appropriately uploaded. So the idea, the idea to like help swap is there. It's just, I think people forget to upload content that I don't need a handout. I need a lesson plan. And what a lot of people were uploading were handouts. I got thousands of those. I can find my own. Give me new ways to teach old material. That's what I need. And I'm guilty too, you guys. I have gobs of lesson plans and I just forget to upload them. I'm like, I should upload this. And do I do it? No. And I'm the keeper of the files. So
Yeah, but that's the kind of thing that, I mean, we've been doing that basically it just needs to be part of an infrastructure and somebody needs to maintain that infrastructure and it needs to be part of a process. And, we can continue doing this every week because it's pretty low hanging. I mean, it's just like an easy thing. It's a link, right? You have time, but that kind of stuff is made. I mean, that's the stuff that Betty and Lois used to do at MDE, decades ago, because it was part of that centralized service at MDE to support in ECFE, right? And Menafee is volunteer. And so we can't like look to Menafee and say, well, you should be doing this or, and so then then there's also such turnover, like I've observed in the Friends of Family Education, that somebody will randomly post, does somebody have, I'm teaching this group, like I haven't done this before. Does anybody have a lesson plan on this, right? And then I'm thinking, Ellen, bless her heart, she started it, right? But it's like, it's not on you to maintain it. So it is what it is, right? And so, I mean, technology has been wonderful for giving us the platform for the ability to share and even, like with this, I could go to Google Drive and I could do a search for icebreakers and see what, came up. But I think it has, it's a challenging thing to do, kind of on a statewide. The only thing I could figure would be if there was maybe, is there a centralized online source that you would say every district uses? I mean, I know Mike has his.
I was going to say, yeah, when we've had discussions about this, like, I don't want to recreate the wheel and like start another, another system. So it'd be really great to use one that's already established, like Peers or Mike's Wiki. Like that's what he said, like that's what I created it for. It's just, it never happened that things were actually added.
Yeah.
So it'd be great to use one of those that are already established and people know about, instead of being like, wait, now there's like 4 or whatever.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And then it's just like, which one do I go to? Oh, I went on here and nothing's been added since 2016. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Anyway, one day we'll have an app on our phone, or we'll have something embedded in our eyes. So all we need to do is think about it and all the resources will immediately be in our heads.
Well, and Becca, that is the ask I get from students. Like, every district is so different about how you acquire lesson plans. And they're like, I feel like I recreate the wheel coming into a new position. If there isn't a centralized system within the district that has like really good stuff post 2015 or I don't know, 11 or whatever. So like, that's the point, right?
I
Oh,
have such strong feelings about this because as a new teacher coming into it, I had zero. It's not that there wasn't a good organized thing of recent materials. It was that there was zero anything. It was you're creating curriculum from scratch, go. You have an education, so you should know what you're doing. And it was like, crikey, okay, diving into the deep end, you know, hours and hours. And this is kind of a side topic, but I get so frustrated with how little we get paid for prep time. It's like, oh, I get a half hour per class. Hey, you know, it takes me 5 hours to prepare a lesson for a 1 hour class, right? I mean, if I've never prepared this information before, I'm finding the resources, I'm trying to come up with everything. I feel like teachers in their first year or two should be getting paid at least double prep time because they don't have anything to draw from, at least if they're in a district like mine. Now, I've heard stories about other districts where there's a lot of sharing built in. So there's other parent eds there and they've got stuff to draw from, but I had nothing.
Well, and I heard, was it somebody here who said anything they created, they couldn't take it with them?
Like the
In
district.
Minneapolis?
that's what Minneapolis, you sign it
Oh.
away. And when you sign up to teach at Minneapolis, you can't.
I
do
am
anything.
sorry. That's
intellectual
insane.
property. I mean,
Right. And Minneapolis is saying it's their intellectual property when
If
you
it has
decide to
the
work for them.
logo, the Minneapolis logo on it, then it's theirs.
Right. But if you created it for
Right.
your teaching,
right.
you can't take it with you. That's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's great for like whoever comes in to teach in Minneapolis because it's like, oh, then if it's Minneapolis's property, then there's a whole stack of lesson plans for them
Well,
there.
and I guess like, yeah, I guess I should be more specific because like I did that during the summer. So they paid me hours to put together a couple lesson plans to make like a foundational one, like you're talking about, Becca, that was on a Google Drive. And so that's that's their property. If I just like created a development topic or whatever, and stamped their logo on it, which we have to have our logo on everything. And then I just like, once I left, put my own, I don't know, in PowerPoint, like formatted it differently, that's fine. But I was charged to do that during the summer. So that's their property. So I can't share it. Yeah, it's wild.
Yeah, because that was the conversation I've had. I mean, I created this technology course that I teach, and in retirement, like I talk about technology and families and stuff like that, and just on the outside, that there's another university that is interested in, because I've done some consulting with universities on like course development, curriculum design, that kind of thing. On that, I just wanted to know, it was just like, is it mine? And they have like legal people, like they have people who really wrestle with this stuff, and it was super helpful around what is yours and kind of, and a lot of it comes down to, and this may, like, did they pay you to do this? Was this, and so that could be the sticky thing as well. You were salaried and, you did this under our watch. And so therefore anything. Yeah.
Well, that was the thing, right? Like, I'm not going to not get paid. Like if someone offer to pay me to do this, I'm like, yeah, duh, I'll take that money. But then it's like, well, then all the work I did. Yeah. Anywho, I bring it up just because like this is such a great group for bouncing those ideas. Like we're trying to get a graduate assistant position going for this specific thing because I'm just hearing students ask for it so much, and it's tricky, right? Because you also, if you create a lesson plan and you put it in the hands of a brand new parent educator, is that the right way to do it? Like, is that like, are they going to, I don't know, like, you also want to be able to like meet them where they're at in their teaching. But how can we have some like foundational lesson plans, like just basic scope and sequence of what you do for birth to 5 or something like that,
Yeah.
as a starting point. But like it's tricky, right? Because like then like Becca, like you work with like multilingual families or like apply then how do you differentiate based on a very, so there's all these questions that like we're grappling with, like what would be the best way to do this. So I'd love to hear ideas if anybody has
As
them.
a super needy teacher though, like having anything to start from and knowing, okay, this isn't an ELL lesson, but I can take this as a framework and I can build on it. Especially if there was, I put in the chat, like all the things I want. It's not just lesson plans. It's like, I want activity ideas and icebreakers and like all these different things. It's like, well, if you had a place where you could have something to start with, the reinventing the wheel is serious, y'all, with parent educators who are just thrown in on their own. We're
Mhm.
all doing it over and over and over again.
Right. Right.
And part of, but so I did that when I started too in Edina. They had a legacy curriculum that was pretty dated and kind of lousy in some ways. And so it was a starting point, Becca, but not for every topic. I mean, pretty soon you're into territory where you're tailoring and customizing and updating. So even if there were a library of core curriculum, I just think it's such a job to keep that current and fresh. And then can I also make a confession, which is that a lot of the lesson planning that I do, like I don't develop it to the point where it would be shareable. So I've never been required to, and I think this, I'm gonna, how to say this, as a new parent educator working under a coordinator who had no experience with ECFE nor parent ed, nor parenting, it was very loose in my first 4 years of like what I was accountable to show and provide in terms of what I had prepared. I did a great job because I do a great job, but I might not have. And it would have taken a while, I think, for someone to figure that out. But I don't have, even the best education possible, Susan Walker, that I had to prepare me for this industry, for this career. Like I could write, when I was observed and whatnot, I could write like a formal lesson plan. I never do it now. I never do. I always think about how it ties to the core curriculum. I often drop those in for parents to like a slide and be like, hey, this is why. But I never type. And
Here's my
I still don't.
confession, Sarah. Sarah, I did. I did write the whole thing with, these are my objectives. These are like, I have that
Wow.
green book. I did. So double work, right? I'm doing so much work, but also insecure new teacher. It was my security net. It was my safety blanket. It was my, okay, I've got this piece of paper. I have to say now in year 3, when I sometimes don't, or sometimes kind of am after the fact, or I'm working off more of an outline than a fancy lesson plan, I think I'm a better teacher. I really do. I think that when I depended too much on those lesson plans that pretty much wrote out almost every single sentence I was going to say, there wasn't enough room for the class to go the direction it was going to go. And my insecurity played to my weaknesses of talking too much. Do you know what I mean? Like, it was like, okay, I have to fill this time and space, and these are all the things I'm going to say. And now with a few years under my belt, I feel like I do a little bit better job of taking that step back and letting it go. But I still need a starting place. But you're right. It's like having something that's shareable. You might have something you do every year that works great, but how do you share that? How do you figure out how to write it all down and make it into a lesson plan?
And when I started too, I had all the possible information and all that could go this way. And here's some points. And it could go this way, and here's some points, and it could go this way. And so when I post those on, whenever someone's like, does anyone have a lesson plan on, whatever, I'll be like, here's one, but please don't panic. You see how much information. I think my potty training learning lesson is like 3 single space pages. Any new parent educator who gets that's going to be like, holy crap, no pun intended. How are we supposed to get through all this? Right. So that's the other problem too. I think you don't want to dumb it down and think that new people starting out at this like don't know what they're doing, but also having that safety net of, oh, we're talking about this, hang on, and then you feel confident. So Becca, I think it just shows that you're getting really good. You're getting good at your job. And there was one time I was like, oh, I'm doing this for a baby class, and I opened up the file and I had nothing. I'm like, what? I don't have a lesson plan on this. How is that possible? You know? So I was like, okay, keep calm and pretend it's on the lesson plan. I have that on my desk. And like you said, it was fine. And there were actually things that happened, and I came down and I sat and I wrote furiously at my desk after, and I was like, that was amazing. I didn't even need a lesson. So yeah, it's kind of a double-edged sword. You want to provide information, but you don't want to bombard them with 3 single space pages on learning how to use the toilet.
Yeah, I think what I would love most is ideas and activities and all the extras. This YouTube video is so great. You want to share this link, you know, like the little bits and pieces that you would use to put a lesson together.
One of the
Makes me
things,
think of like a journey. Go ahead.
no, you're fine, Greta, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, it reminds me of like the trades, and you work under a journeyman. Like your lesson plan is a journeyman for you, and you can reference it and it can be there to support you. And if you don't use it, you don't use it that day in that experience. But eventually, even you maybe don't have to be under, right, the journeyman. You are a journeyman, and then you do whatever it is that you need to create what your art is, what your craft is. And it changes, right? Human development, career development. I think, I don't know, that's kind of the picture I have, Becca, is that you're in a place where you depended on this journeyman to be there for you to look to while you're creating and fine tuning your craft. And you're getting more and more experiences to call upon when you're in the middle of something, because you're like, oh yeah, that's right, there's this thing, or we could go this direction with this now. It's an art that you develop, and I think you're feeling that.
So one of my questions about writing lesson plans, and I'll confess I'm not great at it, but it's the same objection I have, or the same concern I have with people who use the word daycare instead of childcare. I said, we don't care for days, we care for children. And I don't teach potty training or how to combat racism. I teach parents. And the dad who's an Army recruitment specialist and the mom who's a children's hospital social worker have very different needs and what they need and want to learn. And so I think people are astounded and disapproving sometimes when I ask every single class, not every single session, but every single group, what do you want to learn this semester? I have a topic list that has like 40 topics on it and 3 blanks, and say, what do you want to learn this semester? And if they tell me, like, I want to learn how to raise my kids in a polarized world, which is on my topic list right now, that's what we'll talk about. But I'll talk about it very different in those 2 classes with those 2 people. And so I think writing absolutely everything down for everything we do is challenging. And so, and we have new, like, I'm not sure what they're called in your district, but ours are called continuous improvement coaches. And we've had a number of them who don't know anything about parent ed. And so they don't get at all what we're trying to do. And they served for 2 years. So the first year we're trying to teach them what we do. And often they make helpful suggestions, but it's not like having a parent educator do this. So it's really, there are really challenging pieces to it. And if we want to do what's andragogy, if I have to tell another administrator what andragogy is and why we're doing it instead of pedagogy, I'll scream. But adults are best motivated by choosing what they learn. And so that's why we do what we do.
Just on the off chance, Mary Kay, that somebody doesn't know what andragogy is.
It's the teaching,
I think I know, but
the
can you
teaching
just
of
say that out
adults.
loud?
it's the teaching of adults.
Teaching of adults, as opposed to,
Pedagogy, which the word peta actually is the same root as for pediatrics. It's the teaching of children.
Right.
But school education, formal education, at least up through 12th grade, has used pedagogy to mean the teaching of everyone alive. And it's not so.
And I would say too, I've talked to people in districts that have had like frameworks that they have to report to and that sort of thing. That tension between being given these frameworks that were written for K-12 that don't work for, like, that they have to modify a lot of these either teaching practices or teaching outcomes or whatever, because it's adults. And also the huge difference between mandatory attendance, right, in a public school and voluntary participation, right? And that again, speak to andragogy. So.
Well, and also a step beyond, it's not even the same as teaching adults who are, say, getting their master's or something like that. It's not the same as getting a grade or going for a degree or for a license. This is like a totally different thing. And it's, Susan, constant. Every single staff development thing I have, every single thing from the district, every single thing about writing my own goals, about student outcomes, it's all based on K-12. Like, I think even the preschool teachers have to do a certain amount of adjusting to make it early childhood, but like, forget those of us who are teaching teachers. Like, I mean, teaching adults, teaching parents, nobody is, we're not in that at all. So it's a constant juggling act to like reframe stuff and how can I make this fit into what I actually do.
And yet the fact that they ask you what your goals are reflects an awareness that teaching adults is different, instead of them just telling you what your goals are. One of the questions on Danielson says, how do you structure your class so that the student knows at the end of the class how well they did or what their grade would be? I'm like, I have opinions about that, but I'm not going to share them.
A couple of years ago when I worked in Faribault, they said we had to have learning targets on the wall. And it said that and this was also in a district where the coordinator had no idea. She came from Wisconsin. She had no clue, not to say people from Wisconsin don't have a clue, you know what I mean? She had no idea. She had no clue what ECFE. And they said, learning targets have to be posted on the wall. I am learning about my, shapes and colors. And we were like, we're not doing that. We're not putting, I am learning about how to stay calm when my child has a temper tantrum. I said, we're not posting that on the wall. And we had to fight with our coordinator because she wanted us to put it in I language. And we're like, these are adults. They are not children. They are here on their own time. And so what we did is we took it from the core curriculum framework and it said parents support their children when they blah, 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 blah. And then we put the I message, like for children, I am learning what it means to cooperate in our family. Like when we talked about jobs or responsibility, but we had to fight so hard because they were shoving us into this same little spot of you have to do it the way preschool does. And we're like, oh, but that's the good example of pedagogy, just making us do the same as everybody else.
Sarah, can you talk about that? I'm gobsmacked. What you just said.
It was wild. You would teach in, like Eleanor was saying, you had to have the targets, and then we were supposed to have a get together at the end, like a circle time basically, at the end of the ECFE class with the parents and the kids needed to rate their learning on how they did on like, could you teach a friend to do this? Could you do it on your own? Are you still, and each kid, so then they had like these colored sticks, and the kids, and when I say kids, we're ECFE, birth to 5 friends. They were supposed to hold up that color relating to where, if they could teach a friend, if they could do it themselves. Yep. After every ECFE class.
Did some of this, okay, I was out of the profession for a few years. I feel like things really changed. So I've been back in for 10 years. I was gone for a few years. I came back after that little break. There's a spot when I was with my kids. I feel like in the attempt of putting ECFE into the teachers' contracts and everything, that you also then have to do all these other things. Is that where a lot of this came from? Yeah, to validate
Yes.
that we should, like we pay a teacher. So that's right. And you can pay your union dues, and also now get the benefits of teaching in a system that wasn't made for you. Is that it, Sarah? Okay. Because I don't have that experience of when that came around. I just know that I know of a couple districts that use that model. I don't teach in one currently, but it is really hard because we want validation, but the validation system is set up for something other than a facilitator, right? A facilitator of adult processing without a degree, like you said, Becca. Yeah.
Well,
It's fascinating.
Sorry, the same system I think I've already talked about, named in this call. Year 3 of that, I was told that we parent educators are a really needful group. And that we were always asking for like special treatment and stuff.
Sarah, would you repeat what you just said? Because I'm sure I missed a word or two.
Well, let me think about it, Mary Kay. How exactly was it put? What I said was that I was told that we parent educators were a really needful bunch.
That's what I thought.
That's what I said. But what was actually said to me, it was something even less complimentary. I can't remember exactly how she put it. I've repressed the memory, not the feeling, though.
I just was going to put in a little 2 cents of, I think some of what Sarah was sharing about the little kids sharing their own, like grading themselves on their own learning seems so ridiculous, and it's wildly inappropriate. And yet I think it comes from a place of good intent. I have noticed as my kids are in school, like my 13-year-old is so proud that he has a student-led conference, and like he has written up basically not his report card, but all the comments, like all the questions, all the deep thinking, so that it's teaching them to like process their own learning, think about it, reflect on it, and own it. And it works. But what works for a 13-year-old doesn't work for a 2-year-old. So that's where it's just completely ridiculous. But I think it comes from a place of good intent and something that schools are trying to work towards, that it's not just all exterior judgment, but self-reflection and stuff. And it's like, that's great. But yeah, no, that's insane for toddlers. I mean, what?
I agree. I agree that it's intentions like this, that it's all in good. We all have the most positive intentions and want to be included in all of the business. I absolutely. But then there's those things that's, developmentally appropriate practice, right? But I loved it because I would have friends that were like, I like the color blue. I like the color blue. And I'd be like, me too. That's me too. I just, it was, but the hardest part was, is when you have parents in front of you and you're doing that. And my job is actually to teach them what's developmentally appropriate. And then you're not doing, you know what I'm saying?
It would be so funny to have an administrator who pushes that on you to come in and see kids like chewing on the stick. Like, do you see how preposterous this is? Like, stick is yummy.
I guess we learn, right? I
But it
guess
also
the
makes it sound like you're
learning is-
trying to teach them like only your ABCs or only like these specific tasks when there's so much more to early education. Like take out the whole parent ed piece of it, but like early education, like you're teaching them all these like things that are hard to pinpoint, the social skills and navigating their own emotions. Like that's such huge important work in early childhood. And are they teaching a friend how to do that? Like what exactly are they even trying to grade themselves on?
Do you think that, okay, is this all current experiences? Like how recent are the experiences we're sharing? Or is it like, Sarah, is that a while ago? Or is it pretty current or
No,
Sarah?
no, I'm my own everything over here now. Remember, I get to do whatever I
know.
want.
Well,
No, that was like 9.
because my
No, that was
9
like,
years ago.
that was 9, like, yeah, like 9 years ago. Like, I think exactly what you're saying, Greta. Yep. I think I believe it was like that time period. Yep. It was like 9.
Because I was gonna say in this current culture and education, if we're not validating social emotional and early childhood, there's a big problem because we started it, everybody. We started it, and this idea goes through K-12 now, and the importance of social emotional learning is huge. I mean, they are working really hard to figure it out. And so Becca, exactly what you said. Social emotional skills are where it's at in early childhood. And so why I brought it up is because I feel like maybe there was a time when all of these, when we were getting into the system and being validated as educators, that we then had to produce data, which is what Ellen was talking about. And they didn't know what data to produce. What does that look like? And it's so different. And so they tried with real good intentions to validate the program and what we do, but then ended up with a system that doesn't fit, right? So, and I think it feels like things have changed. I don't know. Maybe there's some districts out there that still are working under that premise, but I feel like there's learning that's happened. I guess because they're on the other side of it for some things, I guess. I don't know. But is that, I don't know.
Do you think that that's another, I mean, I think about being in that situation of that adjustment where, but I've also, I mean, one, this is a really important conversations because, you know, from our perspective, like in higher education and teacher preparation, right, and having these standards of effective practice, there is tremendous value in curriculum planning education, right? And especially from my perspective, because for so long in other states and in other ways that parenting education is done, it's all about the content and then like a leader's guide, right? There is nothing about the pedagogy or the andragogy, right? There is nothing about the planning. It is just like, you do this, then you do this, then you show this video, then you do this, right? And so to come to a state where parenting education is so deeply embedded in the practice of teaching is such a joy. And then having something like the Parent Education Core Curriculum Framework as having these domains. And I'll say, I mean, I've used those domains in my research about how parents parent, and it's really nice to be able to say, and there's a parent development domain, right? There is a family development domain. It isn't just ages and stages in child development. And it isn't just, although it's important, right, the parent-child relationship, that parenting is much bigger. And then to really break down the fact that what we teach actually starts with objectives and has a plan, like has a framework, has a foundation, like you are a blueprint like you are building a house, that by the end of your lesson, this is where you want to go to. And all of that has a purpose to be able to tailor to your individual learners and think about those materials that you're going to be bringing in the efficiency of a 45-minute period. So you can't, I mean, it's a very common thing, Ellen, I mean, when you talk about the 3 pages, single space, you know, it's a very common thing in teaching curriculum design that people will focus on the content, right? Because that's so much of the, you know, and the objectives is all about learning, but is so much, and you have taken my class, I mean, I push back on, well, what do you mean by learning? And so often in what we do, or what has been designed in parenting education, is around knowledge, right? That the parent will know this, but we know in working with parents that it is so much more. It is having the knowledge, right? Having a base of knowledge, having the developmental appropriateness stuff and things like that. But it is about skill. It is about attitude. It is about feeling. It is about interaction. It is about listening. It is about being attuned. It is about feeling confident. It is so much more than that. And so the fact that in this state, we have such a wide range of indicators in these domains, you know, and that educators can pull from them to truly create a lesson plan that is more than knowing this 5 pieces of content, right? Is such, it's so amazing, you guys. I mean, it is so much not done in, and I do see examples of it in other, you know, other lesson plans or other curricula design or things like that around attachment. I mean, in other states and you know, now in mindfulness and stuff like that, it's like there, but the design, but either they paid a curriculum designer or something. But the fact that we can train everybody coming out of our program, but this is St. Cloud and the others, to be able to do their own planning, right? It's like, just again, it's about the skills. I mean, students will often ask about content, which is why, Maggie, I'm just so thrilled that you're giving them resources to get to the content, right? But the content is out there and it's being updated, and there are books, and this type of a group can share. And I see oftentimes questions in Friends of Family Education that is about content related stuff. But the skill of the planning, of the teaching, of the andragogy, of that attunement to your different, you know, and the stuff that we talk about week after week after week is the artistry of parenting education, right? And so I get, and so to listen about sort of the pros and cons of having the planning, but then letting it go of it as you become more of an expert and knowing, I mean, I'm somewhat challenged with my undergraduate class because as I'm turning it over to somebody else, I realize I was great the first year that where I had like, in, you know, like in this module, we're going to do this, we're going to have this content, we're going to have these learning activities and stuff like that, that after 5 years, it's just like, am I still doing that? You know, I know the class works, but, you know, and so it is the way, you know, that we do things. And so I love this conversation because it truly is the value of curriculum design, right? And yet letting it go. Like once it's embedded in our skills of how we do things so that you can like sketch it out on the back of a napkin or a piece of scratch paper. And it's just like, I'm good to go because I know what I'm going to be doing here. Right. So thank you guys for this conversation. I think it's fabulous.
And like, I don't know if anybody else felt this way, but I don't think I realized until like my 3rd year of teaching how important learning objectives were for me, like just for me, not to measure against anybody else, but just to be like, when you say like, what do you mean by learning? That's how I know. That's like the only, and I'm still working on this, but like, if I want them to do 2 things, what are those? And you have to be so specific if, you know, like it's a real exercise of like, do I want them to understand this concept? Do I want them to be able to define this? Do I want them to be able to like notice where their child is at. Like, what are those words I'm using? I'm still super bad at it, but like, it was like the third, I was observing another teacher. I was like, oh man, she is really good learning objectives. And I was like, oh, I need to hone in on this. But that was just like, I didn't even think about, I don't know why, but I didn't even think about that.
Well, Maggie, do you tell your parents? Like,
I mean, I did like, so, and I think like, again, Becca, this gets down to what you were talking about the confidence stuff, is that if I'm going to say it out loud to the parents, it means I actually have to do it and like get there. And I definitely, my first couple of years of being a parent educator, I was like, oh shoot, like I did not gauge time well, or like, oh shoot, I did not, like all those things that come up. And so it's like, so I had to commit that they were going to learn that if I was going to say it to them. So yes, all learning.
Susan, when you were talking, it reminds me of the phrase of there's the simplicity of life and the complexity. And then when you get to the opposite side of complexity, it's once again simplicity. And I feel like that's the artistry coming forth is in parent education. You like go into it thinking, oh, I did it, or I'm in the process of doing it, or I'm this is gonna work out great. And then you get into the weeds and you're like, wow, there's a lot here. And I really want them to come away with 5 ways that they can A, B, C, D, E, right? And then you get this, and it's complex, and you put down the single space lesson plan. And then there comes a time, I think, that there's simplicity again. And like what was being said, what Maggie was saying was, she said, and then I come down to 2 questions, 2 things I'm thinking about. And I love that. I think that's beautiful, because what you're bringing into the second simplicity or the second naivete or whatever you're going to call it, I think it's enriched because it has the wisdom of the complexity that you've walked through. Just theoretical, but I like the idea of the simplicity after the complexity. Anyway.
Oh, Mary Kay. We can't hear your lovely, there you go.
Sorry. About 6 years ago, one of the topics on my list was talking to your children about racism. And a special educator who is a parent educator as well was in the parent group with the parent whose child she was in the room for, kind of, and told me afterwards, actually didn't tell me directly, went straight to my administrator and said that talking about racism, parents about racism to their children had no place in parent education. Well, I don't think anybody would say that right now. But sometime, and I would say, I personally, I can't name it chapter and verse, but I think helping parents learn about the communities that they're in includes talking about racism. I'm positive it does.
Sarah
And-
Hardy's pulling it out. Look
Of
at
course
Sarah's-
it does.
Yep, it's right there.
Diversity dash ethnic, economic ability or other. Parents support their children's development when they help their children understand and take pride in their own cultural identity and that of others in the community and world. When they teach their children appreciation and acceptance of all people and cultures, and when they advocate on behalf of all children.
Mhm.
Bam.
So, but 6 years ago, that wasn't as hot an issue in general terms.
But that was still in the core curriculum framework.
I know.
Yeah.
I when I put it on there, I didn't think I was doing something outrageously
Oh, got it.
I just thought it's part of what we do. And if it's current right now, it's like we don't talk about,
Bruno?
it's like saying we don't talk about the pandemic or we don't talk about health right now.
One thing I'm thinking is, unfortunately, the core curriculum framework is ours, right? It's from Menafee, and people pushing up against it they don't even know about it. And if you pulled it out, they would say, well, that's from your profession, but doesn't hold any legal weight, right? But what does are the standards of effective practice in teaching, and the core
Okay.
content standards, right, for parenting and family education, which is another true value in this state, that the teacher's license in parenting and family education is state sanctioned, right? And so just like a science teacher, social studies teacher could go to their content standards and say, and those of us in higher education, that's what we're held to. So all of the courses that we teach, we have to demonstrate to the state of Minnesota, how are you meeting these content standards and these standards of effective practice in your preparation of educators, right? And so if we're an accredited or an approved body to teach teachers, and we have to follow them, and this is what our teachers have, then I think that would also be much more so than even, I mean, of course, PEC, CFFI, whatever is great, but from a legal standpoint or from a, you know, something to support you, is the standards of effective practice for all teachers, which does speak to, and parent and family ed is a birth to 8, right? So then you're also covered. And I would guess if you looked at the content standards for early childhood, you would also see the support there with talking to children about race.
Mhm, mhm.
So, yeah. Yeah, oh, realized my have been overlapping, cutting people off without realizing, oh, Greta, we're all good. Thank you. What a fabulous conversation, everyone. So yeah, this has been fabulous. So, and Greta has baby's awake and needs her grandma. I know. Oh, well, you guys, thank you for this conversation. You know, like it's been great to get in the weeds on curriculum design. You know, who would know? Any final words for the group before we sign off for this week?
My goal is going to be to share at least one lesson plan in our document, ladies. Thank you so much for reminding me about that.
There you go. So question, should we send something out to the listserv or post it on Friends of Family Education with an invitation and a link to the peers to share? Oh, I'm going to stop recording.